In the Coast Guard, you shouldn't be sailing the seven seas. In the Coast Guard, you shouldn't be going where you please. In the Coast Guard, the reality's far from the name. In the Coast Guard. Oh, this could be quite a pain. So, today's topic: putting the USA's Second Fleet to work. And this particular long patrol will go live on Monday, so that'll be on the 28th, and I've done the live on the 27th. And really, it comes down to this. I've had to go on some interesting questions about the US Coast Guard all the time, and so far I have had 4 books I have bought on this issue, the US Coast Guard, and I haven't liked a single one of them. And Salmo Hilagas, I keep meaning to ask him for his recommendations because I'm sure he must have a better one. But every time we end up talking about so many other things, I forget that one. But so this is the US Coast Guard and their presence, missions, and deployment, and it's an interesting one. 24 days to go when I did this one. I think I did this, and that does. But when this comes out, it'll probably be 22 days to go. And yeah, I'm overwhelmed by the generosity, people. I had no idea, and thank you very much. It's very kind. I have to keep raising it up a bit. As said, it's going to cover the accommodation costs. Basically, my theory is, and some of the other costs associated with it. But sure, thank you. And the more that comes in, the more I'll try and do while I'm out there. Basically, that's the policy I'm taking it with. And after I get back from this trip, it's a fixed tower. Anyway, founding of the Revenue Cutter Service. Well, that's what they were originally. They weren't the Coast Guard. And they've always been sort of interesting because, theoretically, their role covers, especially today, maritime safety, maritime security, and maritime stewardship, which can lead to an all variety of missions. They have, under their Homeland Security bracket, defense readiness, maritime law enforcement, migrant interdiction, ports, waterways, and coastal security, and drug interdiction. Under their non-Homeland Security missions, they have ice operations, living marine resources, marine environmental protection, marine safety, aids navigation, and search and rescue. All these things, but how is it they end up doing so much diplomacy? It starts off really early. At the very beginning, when this lovely ship, the USRC in Massachusetts, is in the service, they start doing diplomacy because they have to. They end up wandering into Mexican territory occasionally and calling at Port Stair. They, this is the trouble. They have Canada to the north. They have various islands in the Caribbean, etc. You end up sailing around. You're doing enough of the local work. You're going to end up doing the presence mission by de facto, whether you aim to do it or not. And this is the reality of the US Coast Guard. But honestly, one of the most interesting things is I will go through this, and we'll be discussing, of course, the presence mission and what their ships get up to and what they do and what they are part of. But about halfway through, you're going to realize something, and I'm going to see if you realize it before I get to the actual slide where I'm going to point it out. And yes, I am normally one of those historians who likes to just give you the information as much as I can, tell you what's my analysis, but give you the information so you can draw your own conclusions from it. At this point, I'm having a bit of fun. And I love the idea of a revenue cutter service. It makes perfect sense. This is the US reacting to what they need to do. The Royal Navy sort of ends up with part of this role in the UK because of the scenario they're faced with. the fact is, the Royal Navy needs peacetime roles to keep its ships going. The US doesn't want the Navy to have a peacetime role because they want to try and keep it on the minimal budget possible. It's not good to have. It's like it's not good to have soldiers sitting around in barracks doing nothing. It's not good to have a navy sitting around in port with nothing to do. They get idle. You have to give them jobs. Thankfully, Britain had an empire they could go sailing around, but for the Americans, well, they count the coastal service. Now, does have a historical involvement in national security, and one of the links down below you'll find is a link to this document where I got this from. It's their own history document, so they're in their own words. I put up here. I have literally copied and pasted the section into the slides so we can discuss it, but also I want you to think about what I'm not mentioning, because this is their involvement in national security, historically according to them. The quasi-war with France, 1799 to 1801, the Revenue Marine was first charged with protecting the nation's coasts and its interests on the high seas. The Seminole Wars, revenue cutters conducted combined naval and land operations for the first time, adding to national defense responsibilities, one task that proved their versatility. War in Mexico in 1846. 11 cutters were assigned to cooperate with the Army and Navy in the Mexican War. Cutters McLean, Laguerre, Woodbury, Ewing, Forward, and Van Buren were assigned to the Army. Cutters Walcott, Bibb, Morris, and Polk were assigned to the Navy. During the Civil War, 1861, revenue cutter Harriet Lane fired the first shot from a naval vessel in the Civil War. The cutter fired across the bow of the merchant vessel Nashville when the latter attempted to enter the Charleston harbor without displaying the national flag. Spanish-American War, 1898. The Navy tasked the U.S. Life-Saving Service with coast watching. On the 11th of May, 1898, USRC Hudson towed the crippled USS Winslow from certain destruction under the Spanish forts at Cardenas, Cuba, during the Spanish-American War. Congress later conferred a Gold Medal of Honor on her commanding officer, Revenue First Lieutenant F.H. Newcomb. His officers and crew were awarded silver and bronze medals. World War I, 1917 to 1918. Cutters are first assigned to escort convoy duties in European waters, and all they filled admirably and again carry on in World War II. Notable instance, on the 6th of September 1918, CGC, Coast Guard cutter, Senecas, crew attempted to bring the torpedo British collier Wellington into Brest, France. 11 of Senecas' crew sent as boarding party aboard the collier were lost when Wellington foundered in a gale. On 26 September 1918, the Imperial German Navy submarine UB-91 torpedoed and sank the GCG Tampa. Tampa had been escorting a convoy bound for Milford Haven, Wales. All hands were lost, 111 Coast Guardsmen as well as 4 US Navy, 11 Royal Navy, and 5 civilian passengers were killed. The bodies of 2 of the Coast Guard crew were recovered and buried in a small churchyard in Lamprey, Pembrokeshire, Wales, Great Britain. One body was returned to the family in the US after the war, while one, who was never identified, is still interred in Lamprey's churchyard to this day. Local residents continue to care for the grave. The Espionage Act of 1917, the Coast Guard was given powers to prevent sabotage at the nation's harbour. And in 1939, President Franklin declared neutrality, of course. Navy assets were insufficient to carry out the patrol effectively. The Coast Guard subsequently added cutters to the neutrality patrol. It's all fairly national security-ish, isn't it? And this is what the Harriet Lane looked like. She had an interesting career. But it shows you what the cutters sort of look like at this point. They are solidly built, stable ships. Harriet Lane, not too fancy, not too special, but very capable. And it's rather appropriate that she was the first naval vessel to fire a shot in the American Civil War, because honestly, the Coast Guard were almost more of a standing force than the Navy was at the time. The Navy didn't really get much respect, but the Coast Guard, well, they were the revenue cutter service, so they got their funding directly from the Treasury. Always helps when you're directly funded by the Treasury. The Treasury don't like spending money on anything, but their own departments, they'd love to. Okay, let's consider more historical involvement in national security. World War II. Many of the Coast Guard's missions are augmented and expanded during the conflict. New missions and responsibilities added as well, including the operation of long-range aids to navigation facilities, the addition of responsibilities of merchant vessel inspection and documentation, and licensing of merchant marine personnel. And there's a whole host of notable incidents, of which my favourite is 24th February 1943, GCG Campbell, under command of Commander James A. Hirschfield, and assigned to the International Escort Group A3 that was escorting convoy ON 166 through the North Atlantic, engaged numerous submarine contacts during a running battle across the sea. Campbell's attacks damaged at least 2 U-boats. The cutter also rescued 50 survivors from a torpedoed Norwegian freighter. Then on the 22nd of February 1943, as Campbell returned to the convoy after rescuing the Norwegians, it detected a radar contact closing the convoy. Campbell raced toward the target and soon made visual contact. It was the surfaced U-606, early disabled by a depth charge attack delivered by the Free Polish destroyer Brza. The Campbell closed to ram while its gunners opened fire. The big cutter struck the U-boat with a glancing blow, and one of the submarine's hydroplanes sliced open the Campbell's hull, flooding the engine room. The crew dropped 2 depth charges as the submarine slid past, and the fire explosions lifted the U-boat nearly 5 feet. Hirschfield later noted, "I felt sure he was ours." The Campbell illuminated the U-boat with a spotlight, and the gunners continued to fire into the submarine's conning tower and hull. Hirschfield was hit by a shell fragment, but remained at his station. When he realized the Germans had given up, he ordered his men to cease fire. The Campbell then rescued 5 of the 606 crew. Due to the collision, Campbell was towed to safety, repaired, and returned to service. Commander Hirschfield was awarded a Navy Cross for this action. That, I do believe, is actually the base history behind some very famous movies about the World War of the campaign in the Atlantic in World War II. If you can think about them, you know what I mean. Korean War, 1950 to 1953. A Coast Guard PBM seaplane crashed during takeoff after having rescued 11 survivors from a ditched US Navy aircraft shot down over the coast of mainland China. A total of 9 servicemen lost their lives in this crash, including 5 Coast Guardsmen. I do like the Lake class. USCG GC Champlain. It's a good-looking ship. And again, you start to get the idea very quickly when you look at these ships that what the Coast Guard are looking for when they're designing ships is sturdy. In fact, honestly, I would say that they were probably looking at the US Navy's destroyer program and going, those are very thin ships, well, they never work for us. Historical involvement in national security? Well, it carries on. Vietnam War, they're involved there. Coast Guard cutters, Androscoggin, Minnetonka, Winona, along with 82-footers and Navy assets on patrol in Vietnamese waters, thwarted a communist attempt to run 4 trawlers through the Market Time blockade off the coast of South Vietnam. The cutters sank 3 of the trawlers and forced the 4th to return to Hainan Island without landing her cargo. The defeat of this attempted resupply was hailed as the most significant naval victory of the Vietnam campaign. They took part in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. They took part in, well, of course, they were part of the response to terrorist attacks in 2001. And, of course, they took part in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And this is the Hamilton class, which were, until the Legend class, or what are sometimes called national security cutters, came into service, the largest vessels in service with the Coast Guard. And for those of you who are looking at that ship and going, looks like it's missing stuff, they are designed to look like they're missing stuff. Coast Guard ships are almost criminally underarmed for their wartime role in peacetime, and in wartime they have to be rapidly upgraded. So they actually are probably the original service in the world, which makes a big thing of being fitted for, not with. For even the Royal Navy had it. But is something missing from all these involvements in national security? There's something not quite there, isn't there? They do all this national security work. What are they missing? Presence. They're missing diplomacy. In fact, this is my big problem with the books. They talk about the wartime role of the Coast Guard. They talk about the high-profile rescues. The day-to-day stuff that they do, it's like, it's almost considered like it's a new thing. Oh, they're now being used in Southeast Asia, etc., for diplomacy missions. And this is new. No, it's not. US Coast Guard has been doing this for a long, long time. Maybe not officially, maybe it's not an actual mandated part of their functions, but they've been doing it. And that's a problem. That's a problem for the Coast Guard. Do you know one of the actual documents I read during preparing this PowerPoint presentation lecture series, what I've called a combination of Long Patrol and the Live, was called "The Coast Guard Needs a Mission Statement" in 2015. It was written in 2015. And I went through the whole way through reading it and thinking, I could boil down the Coast Guard's mission to one thing, one sentence. They are the US at sea. If you need them to help, they help. If you need them to fight, they fight. If you need them to just be there, they're there. The US Navy could also have that one, but they also have SEALs and the US Marine Corps as part of the Department of the Navy, and they do all sorts of power projection plays with aircraft, etc. So they're sort of like the US. How do I put this? The US in ultra US version. It's kind of like it's the Texas US in sort of everything's bigger and more in Texas is the reputation that goes around the world. Every Texan US Marine I've ever mentioned lives up to that. You meet a regular US Marine, they have confidence. They are there, they're present. You meet a US Marine who's from Texas, and it doesn't matter if she is the shortest thing you've seen, the personality will fill the room. Even if they don't try, even if they're trying to be unassuming, their personality will fill the room. That is the US Navy sort of version of America. Whereas Coast Guard, they are the quieter part of America in a way. How do I put that? In my life, I've been lucky to meet a lot of Americans, but I have to say the two groups who always strike me as the most distinct have been the Texans and the Wyomings, and I'm not sure, perhaps it's because that's the ones I've spent most time. But the ones from Wyoming, they tend to be understated, not flashy, and just get everything done. If you want quiet competence and it all done, that's them. And I always consider it sort of they're both the America, but they have those sort of different traits almost, and different ways of expressing and promoting themselves. And the U.S. Coast Guard is this: they are America. They're there to help. In this picture, this is a US Coast Guard vessel entering the Black Sea. It's going there for presents. And it's kind of like sending an LCS, but without sending an LCS. Because this is technically a non-military vessel. It's a civilian ship in some regards. Well, it's grey enough area they can make play of it. It's painted white. It doesn't look threatening. I would argue that actually that's the advantage the US Navy has with the US Coast Guard being in existence. Where they can afford to have their warships painted grey because when they want to have a showy ship to show up and just be visible and seen in harbour, well, they send in the Coast Guard. Whereas for other navies around the world, they've got to actually start considering returning to a different colour scheme, and the paint and the cost of the paint jobs which will be involved with that. The US has the Coast Guard. They are this visible, shining white presence when they turn up. And the trouble is, the Presence mission doesn't fit in either of their official missions. They, it can be classed under defense readiness, and it can be classed under other law enforcement, especially the maritime security dimensions, etc. they get involved in, and especially true in the South China Sea. But it's complicated. It's not something you can easily put into a mission statement as something which a Coast Guard should do. And one of this, part of the research, I've been reading all sorts of papers about the Coast Guard, and the amount of think tanks which complain about the Coast Guard doing anything other than sitting off the American coast is absurd. But I think I've gone for check just to hear those same think tanks complain about the US Navy sitting anywhere other than off the US coast, and most of them do. And in the nicest way, that's not a good use of maritime assets just sitting off your coast, wandering up and down. There are other things you can do with them which are far more useful and far more beneficial. If you want to deal with drugs and those sort of operations which the Coast Guard gets into, going forward is the best way. Because they can land anywhere on the American coast, but they're not going to be able to launch from lots of places on the other coast, on the coast they're coming from, so you know roughly where they're going to be. But you can't do that sort of mission without doing the presence mission, without building a relationship with the locals you're supporting under that mission, without engaging in diplomacy, without being able to interact and be a visible part of the United States. The US Coast Guard is very interesting historically when it comes to these missions, because the more and more I look at their operational history and the stuff I've been able to glean from those books and from other sources, the more I can put together a picture of what they're doing. But people do not enunciate it. They don't discuss it. It's not the sexy part of the US Coast Guard's history. This is going to make the live, when I record it, very interesting, because there is going to be a limit to what I can actually say in terms of I can prove it. This is why I am being probably shorter on this long patrol than I normally am, because I'm always very careful with the lives. They'll tend to be longer. I can explain things in long form because people will listen to the whole thing, and I can add in the codicil. This is what I believe based on me looking at the evidence and working out what is logically happening, what I surmise from the information I have available, me filling in the gaps. I like the long patrols to be more about the gaps of this is what we have. And it does fit under both these roles. Defense readiness. Well, participating in overseas deployments is an important demonstration of the Coast Guard's commitment to the national fleet policy. Coast Guard medium and high endurance cutters have made TSC and maritime interdiction operations deployments to US CENTCOM, US Pacific Command, and US European Command, and US Africa Command areas of operational responsibilities in support of Department of Defense missions numerous times over the past 20 years. For these and other missions, Coast Guard cutters and other assets act as force multipliers with the Department of Defense. With Department of Defense funding many of the defense and warfighting capabilities of the asset in order to use them in war and for contingencies. It also comes under law enforcement. As global fish stocks decline, financial incentives increase to foreign fisheries to poach US stocks. Although foreign encroachment can occur anywhere in the EEZ, it is most likely to occur in remote areas where high value or high quantity fisheries are found, such as the Bering Sea along the US-Russian maritime borderline, in the west of the Central Pacific, around Hawaii and outlying US territories, and in the Gulf of Mexico along the US-Mexican maritime border. These incursions represent a theft of US resources and violation of American sovereignty. And again, Patrolling fisheries and helping other people protect their own fisheries is a very good method of protecting your own. If you are a rich and powerful nation and you don't want people to come thieving your fish, you have to make sure they're preserving their own fish stocks. And whilst, for me, from the UK, we have ships, that's fine. You don't need to come help us. It's very kind if you do, but you don't need to. But places like Micronesia and all those islands, etc., that are being fished out by huge fishing fleets, which belong to, let's be honest, China. You'll know it. And that come and fish and basically hoover up the ocean's bounty. You have to watch for. You have to try and help them as best you can. Because if you don't, then not only are you probably going to get the Chinese fishing fleet coming and trying to hoover up your area, but you're also going to get the fishermen from those nations who are getting more and more desperate for fish, taking greater and greater risks to try and come out. Or you're going to have to spend on search and rescue because they're going to have an accident in your area. It's always better to try and make sure there is good stewardship worldwide. And again, this is, as I've admitted before, I am a British Conservative. My political leanings, they're the party I disagree with least in the UK. Please note that phrase, though, before anyone starts saying, do you agree with this, do you agree with that, to me, in the comments and things, disagree with least. That means there are parts I probably agree with in the other political parties. But I disagree with them more than I do with the broadly speaking, philosophy behind the current governing party. Broadly speaking. Someday me and Drac might just found our own party just because we just want to deal with it properly. Anyway, this is another of their cutters, and I found it kind of interesting looking at the US Coast Guard because they have a very distinctive livery, and I love that they've kept to it. At no point have they been tempted to go, "Ooh, we should change this or this or that." No, they've gone, "Yeah, we look good. Yeah, we're bright white, but that's our point. We're police on the sea." If the route of policemen is man of the city, polis, I do sometimes wonder whether the Coast Guard should be well, I was going to say merman, but we'll leave that to one side. Anyway, key areas of focus. Geographically, South America, Arctic, and South China Sea. That seems to be where a lot of them currently operate at the moment. They do sometimes pop into Europe, as you saw from the earlier picture. They go right into the Black Sea and Africa. But outside of America, it's South America, the Caribbean, South China Sea, of course, and the Arctic. And the Arctic's a big thing for the US Coast Guard. This is why they need, well, the icebreakers, etc. Mission-wise, they do a lot of relationship building, and they do a lot of grey zone conflict management and maritime security. But those missions usually are not the missions they talk about when they're doing them. They are force multipliers. They are all sorts of things are used to cover up the fact that that's what they're really doing. And it can all be boiled down to one word. They do presence. They are the presence. In a very real sense, they are as much a tripwire for the US at sea as the LCS is, as deployments of a few troops here and there around the world are. Yeah, a Coast Guard ship is not the most powerful warship you're ever going to fight. But you fight it, yes, you'll probably win. But the next thing, well, the last thing you'll probably see will be the absolute mountain of grey hulls, which will, if it goes according to the US plan, come swarming over the horizon after they've already probably blown you to smithereens with long range fires and aircraft attacking. Arctic Patrol, the Polar class, of which only one of those is currently available, and US SCGC Healy. Healy is, of course, nearly 30. Well, no. Yeah, nearly 30 years old. 25, 25 at the moment, 5 more years, and she'll be 30 years old. That's a very old age for an icebreaker. It's not really, it's kind of strenuous on the whole. It does all sorts of damage to you. Yeah, do you really want to be in a 30-year-old icebreaker? Well, don't worry, you have a choice. You can be in one that's coming up for 50 years old. Polar Sea. 23 was launched. So next year it's 50 years old. This is infrastructure. This is not sexy, but it's infrastructure. And if you want to be involved in the Arctic, if you want to be involved around the world in what's going on around the world in the very polar regions, you need these ships. And yes, I know I'm coming from a nation which has one naval one and one civilian one. So, the one being the Royal Science Ship David Attenborough. Of Boaty McBoaty-face fame. These are far cool looking. I like the sort of the inversion of the traditional color scheme, in that they've given them the red icebreaker hull, but they've still got the Coast Guard lines. And if we go back to, you see, there's the red band, which is part of the Coast Guard symbology. But on these ones, it's a white band on the red hull. It's a sort of inversion of the traditional hull color scheme. And I like it. I like the way they put it through and they thought it together. It looks good. It looks like presents. What I don't like is that the Coast Guard just had 3 of these vessels, and that now they have 2, with one of them serving, with the remaining third one serving as basically a source of spare parts. And yes, you can do international ice patrol using a C-130. But if you need to move an iceberg out the way, or rather want to track it more closely, you probably want an icebreaker nearby it. We can spot it. Yay! Can we do anything about it? Well, we could bomb it. It's not usually a good idea. There is always someone who suggests whenever there's a large iceberg around, let's bomb it. Oh, you're going to create lots of smaller icebergs which are going to float around as navigational hazards. Or we could just, if necessary, attach a tow rope. We're using some drilling gear, etc., to it, and hook it up behind an icebreaker, and very, very slowly, hopefully, adjust its heading. Or occasionally, there are even some ships which have, in the past, have nudged icebergs, which is a whole different thing. Um, I'm fairly sure it was a US Coast Guard icebreaker which did it, and I think it was around about World War II time. And the story I've got comes from one of my father's mates, an American guy, actually the first Texan I ever met, who was one of the naval architects involved in fixing the vessel after it had done its job. It did its job, but it needed fixing afterwards. And yeah, that sounded like a scary job. Although I'm not going to relate the story word for word from what he said because uh, he had a healthy dose of the raconteur in his makeup. This is the new heritage class, which are not replacing the legend class. They're the largest and basically small warships. But these are, what can I say about the heritage class? They're a darn good hull. I mean, literally. The more and more I read about this design and the more I look into them, the more I go, why are they only building so few? Well, it's because the US Coast Guard doesn't need that many. But honestly, US Navy, tack on to the order. Seriously, not much work. You could fit these out with a nice VLS system, and you'd have a perfect patrol vessel for the US Navy for dealing with low threat areas and presence missions the US Navy has to do. Because this is going to be great for the US Coast Guard's presence mission. I'd love to have a couple of these pseudo modified with some VLS for surface to air to wander around the Straits of Hormuz and places like that. Places where you want a non-threatening asset that will give you presence without giving them casus belli. Because if they go, oh, they're threatening us. What with that great big white blob? It's a very powerful warship. It's got Coast Guard painted on it, and it's bright white. Those watching the news at the moment, and for those who don't know, this is being recorded in 2022, February, on 27th. So currently there's an ongoing war in Ukraine where Russia has invaded. Russia's methodology of war up until this period and right now is characterized by a lot of information warfare. In fact, that's what we see a lot of going on in the world. The grey war, the cyber war, the information warfare haven't replaced conventional warfare, but they have certainly added new dimensions onto it. Coast Guard ships like this are very useful for that grey zone period because they allow you to increase your number of hulls and your number of eyes watching things, and you can fit all sorts of lovely sensors on them if you want. And as long as they can defend themselves, they still can't be perceived as being threatening because they are bright white. Their helicopter is orange and white. They have an orange band on them. Well, reddish orange band. They're cute looking ships. And they're a presence. This is the big national security cutter or legend class. This is the Berhoff. And it's out there with Lake Erie and Decatur. If that looks to you like someone shrunk an Arleigh Burke, there is a reason for that. I think it was supposed to. It's supposed to be the most intimidating, powerful, and long range of the Coast Guard's cutter force. And people often look at me and go, well, why did the Coast Guard need that? And I go, well, they deal with drug running groups which honestly have enough income they can finance a fairly capable and well supported military force, which often has a leavening of mercenaries to ensure a standard of training, not necessarily as proficient or to the level of most armed forces, but certainly higher than your, hopefully, you're higher than your average criminality, a criminal group, a security forces, police force is supposed to encounter. We'd hope. But more, these vessels are the size they are because they are a presence around the world for maritime security. And they brush up against the Coast Guard ships of other nations. Not so much Japan, they're an ally, but China and a few others have their own very large Coast Guard vessels. For the same reason the US has the Coast Guard, its presence. It allows you to be in a place, it gives you a reason to be there because of maritime security and partner relations and regulation of the maritime industry and the maritime sphere, fishery protection and monitoring. That's part of the maritime regulation, of course, but it's also its own major component, really, in its own right. And they've noticed it. Large Coast Guard vessels can give you a lot of capability and presence. Again, I don't think the US Coast Guard is getting enough of the national security cutter, but they are building them still. They build them at a very slow rate. But to be fair, there is an advantage for building a Coast Guard ship for these present missions and taking the strain off your warships. Warships, by their nature, have to be very, very up to date in pretty much anything in order to be viable warfighting components. They have to be maintained at a high level of training and a high level of capability in terms of technology. Coast Guard cutter, well, it can afford to be a 70% solution. Because the odds are, if it's in a situation where you need it to be the 100% solution, lots and lots of things have gone wrong already down the way, and frankly, you've mucked up big time already. Coast Guard presence missions are often dressed up as other things, but you will find them there, and you'll find them doing the mission. Well, I might add. Very well. Right, what have we got coming up? We have got the Norfolk class counties, the Königsberg class, the Glorious Heritage class, and the Pathfinder class. And we've also got more than that coming up because I know I've worked out the 29th of March because I know I've uploaded it. Well, we will see. And also, today, when this has gone live, there will also be going live on Patreon suggestions for March. So for Patron 48 and 49 now. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care, and I hope you enjoyed.